So, hello there, spooky Supians. I've risen from my dark torpor of sleep to talk to you about the fascinating thing that we see in cultures all across the world. And it's the personifications of death. Death is, of course, a main focus in many human cultures, and it seems to be something that's really important to us to think about. And as we often see death also represented by something or someone. And the reason for this, one could argue, is that people like to put a face on things, especially scary things. And few things are as scary as death. So what do we find representing death? Well, it's a lot of different things. We of course have the classic Grim Reaper, which we can see across many Western cultures. And we can also see different, either humanoid representations or even some animals that signify that death is near, like magpies or ravens and other bad omens, so to speak. And I'm thinking that I'm going to go through a few of these more humanoid or godlike representations with you. And if I've forgotten someone that you would have wished for me to talk about, please comment below and describe what they are to you. I'm going to start with Scandinavia, since I'm Scandinavian and it's the closest thing to me. And here we have, of course, the Asgardian representation of death, or its keeper, and that's Hel. And she is the daughter of Loki, one of his few humanoid children. I think she's the only one. And she governs the realm that takes every dead person or soul that isn't rising up to Valhalla. If you're going to Valhalla and you've been a brave warrior and met a brave end, then the Valkyries is going to come and get you and show you the way up. Otherwise, you're going to go down to Hel, and she is described as a fairly cool and collected and just person. She does her job. We also, in Scandinavian cultures, see during the Black Plague another person arise, and she's called Pesta. She's often depicted as an old woman in a black robe, and depending what kind of instrument she brings with her to do her job, you have either bad news or catastrophic news. You see, if Pesta brings a rake with her, then some people in the village are going to survive the Black Plague. If he brings a broom, well, then no one's going to live. So that's really bad news. But then again, the news of death and Black Plague is always bad. So, and we can see something similar to Pesta, but not entirely the same if we go across the Baltic Sea to the Baltic countries. In Lithuania we have, and I'm hoping I'm pronouncing this right, Giltine, and it's a name that comes from the word guilty, which means to sting. And she is often also viewed as an old, ugly woman with a long blue nose and a poisonous, deadly tongue. And it says that she was really a rather young and pretty and communicative woman until she was trapped in a coffin for about 7 years. I imagine that would do terrible things to most. And she also is the sister of the goddess of life, which is known as Lamia. And that also symbolized the representation and the relationship between life and death. You can't have one without the other. And this symbolism often returns in many of these stories about death. You have them as related, as brothers, sisters. You also have them as rivals, or sometimes even as lovers. And if we turn our eyes to Hellenistic Greece, we see a bunch of characters that are involved in the representation of death. We start with Hades, and he is the most known of them all. He's the lord of the underworld. He sees to the souls that enter there and keep them there. That's his job. And then we have Santos, and he is more like a representation of actual death than Hades is. He's the one who fetches people to come down to the underworld when their time has come. And he's often described as a bearded or a winged man. He's sometimes also represented as a small boy. And he is the twin brother of Kronos, which is time. So there we have the representation of time and death as well. And Santos is often shown as a rather gentle but very just being. He basically just does his job. He doesn't take any pleasure in killing people or seeing them die. He's just there to fetch them to the underworld so they go where they're supposed to go. And he then escorts them to Charon, who then ferries them over the river down to the underworld. And he, Pantanos, has sisters. These sisters aren't as nice as their brother. They are the Keres, spirits of violent deaths, and they seem to be rather nasty pieces of work. They're often portrayed as evil, feeding of the blood and the body after they have escorted the soul where it's supposed to go, to Hades. And they often are represented in fangs and talons and dressed in bloody garments, which is a rather stark contrast to Santos' very gentle and just approach. Going further east, we're going to dip into Asia. Asia has many representations of death. The Chinese have Jama, who is also known as King Jan or Janlu, and if I understand things right, he is also often represented as with a Chinese judge cap and the traditional Chinese robes. And he also seemed to have spread over to Japan or with King Emma and Korea with King Joma, so you can find representations of him in their systems. In Japan we also have Izanami, which was burned by the fire god, and she was of course killed by that, and her husband ran down into the underworld to find her. When he found her, he realized that she wasn't as beautiful as she had been before, and an argument ensued over that. After that argument, she vowed that she would take 1,000 lives a day, and thus became the goddess of death. They also have death gods called Shinigami, which are closer to the Western Green Reaper, and they are very common if you look to modern Japanese art or fiction, when they are rather rare if you look to the traditional sources. And of course Korea has also their equivalent of the Grim Reaper with their netherworld emissary, and he is often depicted as a stern or ruthless bureaucrat in Joma's service, and he escorts everyone, good or evil, from the land of the living to the netherworld when their time comes. And this is a theme that one can see throughout these representations of death, that they're seldom pure evil, they seldom take delight in killing or maiming or doing horrible things to people. They're just kind of there when your time comes and make sure that you go to the right place. When we talk about Halloween, we also nowadays talk more and more of it in association with the Mexican Day of the Dead. So I was thinking that I'm going to talk a bit about Santa Muerte here as well, so we have that covered. Central and Latin America has an immensely rich culture when it comes to death and representations of death. But Santa Muerte seems to be started in Mexican folk tradition, and it's a female deity whose fate has been spread in Mexico and up to the United States. You can also see very similar deities or traditions in other parts of Latin and South America. And since the pre-Columbian era, Mexican culture has maintained a certain reverence towards death, and it can of course be seen in the widespread commemoration of the Day of the Dead. And elements of this celebration include the use of skeletons to remind people of their mortality. And the cult of Santa Muerte is what it seems to be a continuation of an Aztec cult of a goddess of death, clad in Spanish and Catholic icons and traditions. In Aztec mythology, this queen of Mictlan, which was the underworld, ruled over the afterlife with her husband, and her role was to keep watch over the bones of the dead. And she presided over the ancient festivals of the dead, which then evolved from these Aztec traditions into the Day of the Dead, after they synchronized this with Spanish cultural traditions and Catholicism. And she is said to preside over this contemporary festival as well, so she's still there, though in new form. San La Muerte, the Saint of Death, is not the same thing. It's a skeletal folk saint that is venerated in Paraguay, northeast Argentina, and the south of Brazil, and spreads from there. The Saint of Death is often depicted as a male skeleton who is, usually holding some form of scythe, very Grim Reaper-like. And though the Catholic Church in Mexico has attacked the divination of Saint Death as a tradition that mixes paganism with Christianity, and that it's contrary to Christian beliefs, many of the devotees consider this a part of their Catholic faith. As you have seen with this short video, death comes in many forms and adaptations. One thing is though that death usually isn't a bad guy or girl, or thing or it. It's just basically a model employee of the cosmos, coming when the time has come and doing its work. And I hope that you guys have found this video interesting, or at least somewhat fun. And I hope that you all have a very terrifying and fun week ahead of you. So happy Halloween from me, and I hope to see you guys soon. Have a great one. Bye!